Alright everybody, welcome! I'm here with Caraflower. It's a bright, very cold January morning here. At the start of 2019, who would have thunk it? And we are going to be continuing with our story with the quest, Estate of Decay. Now, I haven't actually talked to you about the name of this story step. I think it's pretty interesting here. One of the big things that happened with the company that made Guild Wars 2 as it was in development, so between the end of the first game and before the release of the second, was lots of the devs actually split away and left the company to make their own game. It was at a time where there wasn't much focus on Guild Wars, I think, and so it didn't really make the news as big as it would have if these days something similar happened. Or indeed we see does happen. So, these guys all left. They made a game called State of Decay, a zombie survival game. I can't honestly say I've ever actually played. But the dudes that made that were kind of close friends and, you know, ex-ArenaNet employees. So, when it came to making Guild Wars 2, this quest was named Estate of Decay, kind of as a nod towards their brother studio, if you will, the guys that actually made that game. And State of Decay 2 came out quite recently, didn't it? Or it's in press or something? I don't know. I'm not really a fan of that franchise, but it's kind of a cool little bit of trivia. Weird thing as well, from the production of this series, this has always been one of those pieces of trivia. I was like, oh, you know what? If I ever played Guild Wars 2 for everyone, and like tried to do a big series of it, I could tell them weird facts and things like this. So there you have it. Last time we didn't actually do any story in the last episode. It was more one of those adventure episodes, as we found ourselves moving really through quite a lot of Tyria, Or in particular. We're now quite deep in the nation of Or. We're in a map known as Malkor's Leap, which is quite fascinatingly described by the user interface as once having been Or's breadbasket to the north. Kind of a fun idea. You know, you look at Kryta, and I always think that they could have a similar thing where, like, their breadbasket and most of their farming could be near the waters and stuff around in their north. But we get very little of that. And so far in the series, Caraflower has certainly never explored the Krytan regions much, just a tiny bit in Kessex when she went to this haven. But, you know, there's, like, this mysterious level 80 map we've still not seen at all. All in due time, I suppose, guys. But anyway, we're in a brilliant place, and I know we're all excited to get into that horrible-looking mansion over there and see what creepy crawlies and dangerous demons exist within. But first I want to talk to the Pact at this camp, because this is legitimate. There's two, like, extremes of the series we're getting today, all right? And I know we're hyperbolic about a lot of things here, so it's hard to unpack what truly is great and what truly is not. However, the two extremes of today's episode are this. We are going to fight the hardest boss in the entire core game. The hardest boss, and seriously, harder than the final boss, harder than everything we fought so far, with respect to certain things, which I'll get to soon. We're going to fight the hardest boss today, and also, we're going to see probably my favorite area in Or, and one of my favorite areas, in terms of lore at least, in Or, and one of my favorite areas in terms of lore from pretty much the entire game, because we're going to be able to look at these scrolls. So, this is essentially a heart region, but there are no hearts in Or, so we only do this for the fun of speaking to these characters and enjoying ourselves. And I wonder what that means for how many players have actually experienced and had fun with this. We're near the Pact Troops meta event, but not quite. We're, you know, to the north of the main road, so, you know, we're kind of a side area. So, what does Scholar Marula say?
Knowledge are two different things.
That truth and knowledge are two different things, certainly. Well, she says, I calibrated this aetherometer to, aetherometer, she's studying the aether here, to pick up emanations of etheric energy. Now, we can find Orion relics before Zaitan does. This is odd. The signals seem to be especially strong over here. So, okay, so first of all, does she have any supplies to trade? She's got stuff to do with this shelter area. You need to learn all you can about your enemy if you're going to defeat them. The historical significance of this shard barely makes up for its pungent odor. That's brilliant. We received a shipment of these short bows. Of course, I've made improvements. Many troops don't know the details of what we're fighting. I do, and this scepter is part of that knowledge. Okay, cool. So, and then there's still these jewelry boxes, which I've mentioned, but we will talk about at a later date, I guess. Right, so, can I ask you a question? She says, if you feel you can benefit from any of my knowledge, you're welcome to it. Okay, so why does Zaitan want magical relics? Zaitan devours magic to increase its own power. We need to destroy any strong relics we find, or better yet, discover a way to use them for our cause. This is interesting because the fact that Zaitan, an Elder Dragon, is gathering magic via picking up artifacts and bringing them back to Or, that's actually like main story revelations. which the devs have happily just thrown into the open world here. It's a brilliant piece of dialogue to get from an open world NPC as well, right as the main story is about to take us to a mouth, you know, which is to do with gathering these items and consuming them to gain their magic. Why are there so many scrolls scattered around this place? I believe that arming ourselves with knowledge about our surroundings could help give us an edge out here. That's why I've made these scrolls on Orient history available to all of our troops. Okay, I understand. Well, so let's see what we got. We read this in the last episode. That was to do with the Guild Wars, and particularly the Third Guild War. It's kind of an amazing scroll, right? Because, you know, this franchise is called the Guild Wars. How often do we get to read about the lore behind them? Well, this is one. About how as, you know, the followers of the gods were perhaps more peaceful, perhaps a little bit holier, a little bit more higher, and they get dragged into the conflict anyway. I like the thought that Or could afford to be peaceful in the Guild Wars and try and stay out of the Guild Wars, not because they had like some moral position that was superior to the others, but just because they had all this magic around and thus they didn't feel threatened. Most conflict in any scenario in nature, right, comes from when someone feels threatened by something. One group of people feels threatened by something, they feel like they have to go out and attack it. Who feels like they threaten Or? No one. So they just sort of fall into this pacifistic kind of mentality. It's not that they're better people necessarily. Anyway, so I got to be very careful about these scrolls. We're going to spend a while here, and I'm going to shamelessly have us spend a while here, because I got to say, if you got up to episode 92, you probably enjoy the lore like I do. And this is honestly so awesome. So here we go. You wouldn't know it to look at him, but this Norn here is the fiercest fighter I've ever seen. I wonder where he gets his will to fight.
Good hunting.
The last mood I went to was a blast, surrounded by strong women, fierce men, and enough ale to bathe the Doliac herd. Oh, God. Lasted only 6 days, but it was worth remembering. What little I remember, that is 6 days, Jesus, of raw drinking. That's a serious battle going on. You need to stay focused. I didn't come out here because I love fighting undead. I did it because I love my life at home. My friends, the moots, that's what I fight for. I was just reminding myself. This is a great thing as well, because I think so many Norn are kind of flanderized to the point where it's like, ooh, I just love to smash things, so here I am in awe. This guy's actually got a real reason, you know? Wait, I mean, everyone does. All the Norn do, but I like to see him so strictly against just the thrill of battle. Okay, so there's 2 scrolls in this pile. One is on the sinking of Or, and one is called Or Rises Again. All right, well, we've talked a lot about the sinking of Or. We've visited the Vizier's Tower. We've seen plenty. Let's see what this scroll says, though. From within the lands themselves. At the height of the Third Guild War, the Flame Shamans led a massive offensive against the 3 human nations of Tyria: Ascalon, Kryta, and Or. Their flame cauldrons, remember we've seen one of these, alright, the Searing Cauldron. Their flame cauldrons decimated Ascalon in the Searing, and the Char troops marched south, threatening to invade Or. So this march is something that's always fascinated me, because it's like, where did they march from? Down here? And then all the way around? I mean, that's a huge journey to have gone on, right? The landscape would have been a bit different at that point. My phone just went off. Let's see if we can figure out why. Sorry about that, guys. I guess it's an email because I have groceries coming later. Continue reading. In panic, Vizier Kilbron searched forbidden texts and discovered a scroll that he had been hidden away by the 6 gods. He stole it from Ara, taking it to his tower, and there he unleashed its might upon the land. And with a flash of light and an explosion of flame, the nation of Or crumbled and was lost to the depths of the sea. The cataclysm defeated the Char, but it was also the end of Or. One thing, I don't know if I've mentioned so far in the series, probably not, because we've only really just got to Or. There's a very dangerous golem standing next to us. Please go away. Oh, God. That's an inquest golem. There is inquest activity here. Think about that, but that's a story for later, I guess. Yeah, the Char. There were armies of Char here. And they all got blown up in the Cataclysm too, and their bodies will have been on the bottom of the ocean too for hundreds of years, and they will have risen too with Zaitan. And yet we, as for all the Orient farmers and stuff we see, we don't necessarily see, like, Char of the various legions in sort of ghostly risen form here. We see some, but I think that they could have been a bit more prominent. Maybe that would have been kind of cool. Anyway, so that's to do with the sinking of Or. Let's read about Or rising again. The waterways which bordered Or were renamed by Crichton sailors, who called them the Sea of Sorrows. And remember, one of the novels about the rising of Or is called the Sea of Sorrows. I'll note that page sounds like a direct reference to the novel, doesn't it? However, when Guild Wars 2 released in 2012, the novel Sea of Sorrows wasn't actually out yet. So that's a kind of a cool thought. In 2919, after the Exodus, a sudden surge of massive tidal waves crashed the surrounding coastlines. This deluge of water caused the ruin of many ports and settlements, including the great city of Lion's Arch. That's why it's now a cobbled-together pirate haven when we first visited it. When the waters receded, the cause of the flooding was revealed. The entire peninsula of Or had suddenly and violently risen again. Through cruel and corruptive magic, the long-dead citizens of Or had risen along with the land, reanimated by the power of a terrible creature that now lived in the heart of the city of Ara, an elder dragon. Little is known about the nature of this dragon, save that the dwarves once called it Zai-Tan. It dwells in the city of Ara, and from there sends undead to plague our shores. May the Six watch over us. This must have been written by some human in the Priory, since he's favouring the Six. He's saying Six as well, obviously. It's since Cormyr is rising, and, you know, Zai-Tan brought all this back up. So this is pretty new information, but it's just been stocked here in Or. That's the kind of information, really, you'd like to read at the start of the game, almost, right? But they do get it in here by the end.
Please.
So we read that. What about in here then? So we got this nice tent. We got more scrolls here. These scrolls are a part of a work called A Land of Kings. So if you guys know anything about me, if you're a long-term fan, you'll know one of my favorite periods of history, and one of these, if I had any writing talent, I'd love to write a fan fiction about or something, is the idea of the three kings of the three kingdoms. Like meeting, like going to some treaty that goes awry right before the end of all of their kingdoms when humans were the dominant force in this area of the world, right? I love that idea. Well, here we're going to read about three kings as well. They're not actually the same kings that I just mentioned there, but three very prominent kings over history. Starting off with King Doric. Now, that should be a name you recognize, particularly from very early in the series, but if you don't worry, this will be a recap for you. King Doric was the first king of Tyria. So we're talking a long time ago, well before Or sunk and all that kind of stuff, way back, all right? He was the very first king. This is ancient history. His kingdom encompassed the lands we now know as Or, Ascalon, and Kryta, separate lands, but he owned all of them. According to the ancient scrolls, all human royalty descends from this first king. So Queen Jenna in Divinity's Reach right now in her big throne room with the mysterious stone behind her and stuff, she descends from this man. And when we went to Ebonhawk, you remember we found another descendant of King Doric, Commander Samuelson.
Attention, please.
Keep reading. Doric created the human system of governance. He sheltered his people. First, he did that in Or, and then, as the population grew, he sent them out into Tyria with his blessing. He was a kind and noble ruler. You might think, by the way, at that point they founded Kryta, but there's actually a suggestion that Krytans were founded from even further south, so anyway. He was a kind and noble ruler, a man of humility, faith, and reason. All kings should seek to follow his example. Now, this is the man, if you remember, I told you this story when we were in the Temple of the Forgotten God with Abaddon. When Abaddon gave magic to the humans, and everything went kind of nuts, King Doric made a trek to Ara, to the gods, and he begged them to take magic away. King Doric went on that huge walk, and we're going to find references to his pilgrimage, his walk through here in Or later, because this is where he came to. And it seems ruled from for a while as well. Ruling alongside gods as they walked the land. How crazy is that to think about? Read the chapter King Zoran. So now we're many years forwards now, well after Doric. An otherwise unremarkable king, Zoran of Or was a patron and a seafarer. He guided Or's navy into prominence. In a famous act of benefaction, he offered to shelter Lady Glaive from harm during the Second Corsair War. So Lady Glaive, we just saw a reference to in this crypt last episode, the Chapel of Lady Glaive, remember? If you watched Eye of the North series, you'll know all about her. It's really not relevant for Guild Wars 2, which is why I'm avoiding all that backstory. Although she was a pirate, the king granted amnesty to her crew and her fleet and allowed them to hide in the shards of Or so long as they returned his kindness by protecting, rather than preying on, any Orient ships. And here we have King Razor, so 3 kings of Or throughout time. King Razor being the saddest and the most important of them all. Well, not necessarily, but for the current storyline, definitely. King Razor, son of Zoran, was a king of Or during the Guild Wars. As king, Razor tried to shield his people from the wars and encouraged a greater focus on spiritualism, magic, and the arts. He was a genuine devotee to the 6 gods, with faith that was true and earnest. This was long after the gods had gone, by the way. He would have been a devotee to the 5 gods, actually, technically, so that might be a bit of a mistake from the devs. He tried to play peacemaker during the Guild Wars, and he tried to stop the ravages of war throughout Tyria. But sadly, his efforts were unsuccessful. Not only did he fail to stop the wars tearing Kryta and Ascalon apart, but the attempt to use Aurian troops to stop fighting elsewhere left his own country open for an invasion of its own by the Char. So this is how the Char get in, that results in the Vizier sinking the whole goddamn continent, because Zoran the king had, you know, been too selfless with his troop positioning elsewhere. In an effort to save Or from the falling to the Char, Razor's advisor, Vizier Kilbron, invoked a dark incantation from the Lost Scrolls. The uncontrolled magic of the Lost Scrolls caused the cataclysm, sending the entire kingdom of Or to the bottom of the sea. How tragic that, as its last ruler, Razor the Peacemaker bears the horrible burden of its fall. I hate that ... because it makes me want to read more of this book. So cool. Razor's a very tragic character. Now, well, you might find this interesting as well, is the Pale Tree did give us a vision. We don't know to what extent it will come to pass, where we were here in Or, and we went to a tomb, and we communicated with the last king of Or. We communicated with Razor, who started babbling incoherent nonsense to us about the bones of Or being left to rot and seeking the source, seeking the source, seeking the source. That's this guy. Who knows whether Razor's essence is really here, but that's the Pale Tree's, like, convoluted vision of it. So there you go, 3 kings. And you're going to tell me this isn't cool, guys? It's amazing. All right, did we do these scrolls?
Attention, please.
No, we didn't. Okay, so there are 2 scrolls on this pile. One is a merchant's travel journal entitled Everyday Magic and Ore, and the other a research paper with the heading Cygnets. Okay, so Everyday Magic and Ore. My early career as a merchant began in Foible's Fair in southern Ascalon. Imagine my shock as my first encounter with the enchanted markets of Ren. Okay, alright, so here, Foible's Fair was an old pre-searing outpost from way back at the very, very, very beginning of the first game, where there was a mysterious wizard's tower. And here we're hearing about a merchant that used to, oh my god, and there was a little merchant outpost there. It's so cool to see a reference to that. And that was kind of a magically inclined area, I think, because of the wizard's tower that was there. Here, he says, imagine my first encounter with the enchanted markets of Ren. So, Ren, and if you remember, when we spoke to the scout last episode, he mentioned that one of the Pact outposts is the ruins of Ren. So, this is the guy going to Ren when it was still active. And it was enchanted, he says. Fishmongers display live catch in watery orbs above their tents. Porters enhance their strength with spells, routinely carrying loads that would cripple a pack bull. The finest silks ripple in the air, showing their quality. Songs play themselves on golden lyres. Parents project their voices across the square to find the ear of a wayward child. Yet, the real oddity is just how normal all of this seems to them, the Orients. It makes me ponder. So this is an Ascalonian who's visiting Or, right? So he's kind of a regular human now going to the magical ex-god inhabited realm of Or, right? That's the idea, and he's crazed at how much magic there is here. It makes me ponder, how did magic become so common to the Orients, so everyday? In Ascalon, we apply magic only to things of import, when ordinary means cannot succeed. For the Orients, magic is like any other tool, to be used at a whim and with little concern. I worry what this means for Or. Such great feats with such little caution. Surely, even in the land of the gods, there must be a cost. What a well-written piece. So this is like, the guy sees, you know, the way that the culture worked in Or makes it perhaps understandable that Vizier Kilbron is resorting to magic at the end, you know, and kind of unfamiliar, unknown magic in these lost scrolls. To try and save his people. You can kind of understand how culturally he might even have the support of the people and the king in doing that. We don't necessarily know those facts yet, but it's such a cool piece. It feels very Harry Potter-esque as well here. And I like the idea that we're in a fantasy world filled with magic, but even within this world, there's kind of a Harry Potter secret, well, not secret, but, you know, extra magic side to it elsewhere. And that's all, right? And look at it now. Look at the dump it's become. Cygnets. The gods, in their wisdom, disperse their magic throughout Tyria. In their wisdom. Maybe this was written by an Orion. Magic was dissipated so that none might be too tempted by its power. By the way, I'll note as well, guys, since the time that thing at Ren was written, the Elder Dragons were asleep, and for hundreds of years, they kept leaking magic out, and leaking magic out, and leaking magic out. And so Tyria of today, we might think of as something a little bit like Or, with its fish live being hung in watery orbs and stuff. Look at the way that Asura and Inquest and stuff just use magic as a tool, and how much more there is around. So as it's leaked out of the dragons and they awake and they want to kind of regather it, we see. At least Zaitan is regathering it through these artifacts, using his eyes of Zaitan to spy them out. The gods in their wisdom dispersed magic so that magic was dissipated. None might be too tempted by its power. We know that we can draw and contain magic through intense study and the use of certain materials, Cygnets, and also with the blessing of the six. So these skills, the idea is, you know, there are actual physical rings that we've bound magic into, I guess. And also with the blessings of the six. Have the Orient people simply internalized these lessons? Is the land there so magical, so I guess this wasn't written by an Orient, that all are born with the ability to use magic without the need for education? My theory will require more research. So yeah, these actual Orient scrolls definitely picked up from around here, right?
Your attention, please.
Okay, so what else we got? We have some War Masters and Crusaders. Look at this. Char practicing against bear mode Norn. I wish we had more of a sense of how badass Norn were as bears. They feel like such awesome fighting forces to take into awe. Like, I feel safe standing next to a bear form, right? Oh, the Char won there. It's a shame in gameplay they're not really such a big deal.
To the last.
Not that you've seen me really interact with non-racial skills on the series. The scholars won't clear me for patrol until my wounds fully heal. I know when I'm ready to fight, and I'm ready now. What happened? I was attacked by a herd of undead cattle. Didn't realize until after that the pain in my leg was from an undead maggot's teeth embedded in my calf. The wound festered, but I'm fine now. Jesus Christ. You're a liability with a wound like that, soldier. Yeah, alright, I know. But you don't understand. I want to die on the front lines, fighting like the rest of my warband did. Not lying here, being done in by fever. I have to get back out there. We'll be glad for your help when you've healed. That really hits hard, man. Ugh. Who else we got? We got Scholar Frexal. Remarkable! An entire country of farmers, villagers, and craftsmen, all undead and trapped forever in a corrupted version of their former lives. Once it's safe, I intend to research these ruins in full. You seem confident it will be safe one day. If we can't make a stand here, it means the end of the world later. I will no longer exist in that eventuality, and so the only future worth considering is the one that ends without success. I like that. That's very logical. That's very Asura of you. Okay, I think that's fine. So we've got some Marmuks and some Doliacs. More scrolls. There are 2 scrolls in this pile. Ara, City of the Gods, and the Tragedy of Malkor. So remember, we're at a place called Malkor's Leap here. Well, what's that all about? You will also remember super early, Casey Whitedale in Divinity's Reach saw a statue of the gods and saw that they were crafted by a man named Malkor. And I said that by the end, we would get his story. Well, surely if we're going to get it, it's going to be in this region of the world. But first, let's talk about Ara. The 6 gods of the humans are said to have resided for a time within the nation of Or, in the heart of the legendary city of Ara. There is little evidence to show where the gods came from or where they have gone in these modern days. Their impact on human society, however, is incontestable. Not just human society, you can just see how they've shaped everything. One of the things that I think is really beautiful about Guild Wars 2 is we live in a world where the gods are gone. They don't communicate with us. They don't do anything. They're just completely eliminated. And when you look at the timelines of the world, you know, the Elder Dragons have been forces for so long. The Char have been around for so long. The Norn, potentially. The Asura, potentially. We're dealing with such long timescales. The gods were actually only on Tyria for a tiny window of time in the broader picture, right? They were only here for a little while. And yet, look, throughout every episode of this series, how much the gods have impacted and influenced stuff. It makes the gods feel so badass to me, just like that they can be here for such a small time and have such broad-scale implications. Now, you might say that that's the writers of the game interested in the gods more than other subject material, so it seeps through more than it otherwise should. But I like the sense that it's just that they're really powerful, and, you know, that's just a sign of the ripples they caused in this universe. Anyway, read the Tragedy of Malkor. The 6 gods lived in the city of Ara among their mortal followers. Sadly, the glory of their presence was too much for human senses to take in, and their radiance blinded those who stared too long upon their visage. So this was something we'd sort of been hinted at and talked about a little bit in Guild Wars 1, but we're getting a very real story about what's it like to live among a god. Well, this could be unreliable narration, but we're hearing that you can't even really look at them without going blind. Keep reading. Yet the 6 wished their people to know them, for they loved their followers a great deal. They chose one man, the sculptor Malkor, and granted him audience. His task was to make a statue of each god, so that humans might know their creators. Malkor was called before Dwayna and asked to take on this burden. When he saw her, Malkor fell instantly in love, and no matter what the cost to himself, he could not refuse her request. One by one, Malkor recreated the visages of the gods in stone, As he did, that god would retire back to the heart of Ra, and he would see them no more. And so, he saved Dwayna for last, that he might be in her presence the longest. Malcor completed the statues, but even as he did so, his eyes failed him, his sight burned by the glory of the gods. It is said that such was his love for Dwayna that he still completed her statue, having memorized every fraction of her immortal beauty. So this is obviously a really poetic and like romanticized story. How true and practical it really is, as it's been warped in the retelling over the years, who knows? How reliable are the Dwayna statues and pictures, right? When it was done, he asked Dwayna if she favored the image, and weeping, Dwayna allowed him to touch her face, that he might know the precision with which, even blind, he had carved her image. But then, as she knew she must, the goddess Dwayna left and returned to Ra, leaving the sculptor alone. Look at this, even while the gods lived among the people on Tyria, they didn't even spend much time with humanity. You know, the fact that we live in a world abandoned by the gods for the humans might not even be that prominent, because they clearly got used to being pretty isolated from them anyway, such that they had a king at the same time, you know. Keep reading. Tormented and blind, and alone now, Malcor stood upon the cliffs near Dwayna's cathedral, where her statue would stand forever. Realizing he would never again see his beloved, Malcor cast himself into the sea. So this cathedral, remember, we saw the cathedral of Balthazar, the temple of Balthazar. Malcor's Leap has the cathedral of Dwayna. We will see it by the time this series is over as we explore this place. Standing by it, Malcor cast himself into the sea. The site of his death is called Malcor's Leap, and each year, Orient maidens wreathe the rocks with flowers in memory of the famous sculptor and his loss. Because remember, all would go on for like 1,000 years after this event and after the gods left. And they would wreath it in... I've got such a beautiful image in my mind right now of these lovely like flowers across this nice golden cliffs and, you know, at sunset or something on a pristine... Don't forget, this is the bread basket, so it'd be all green and amazing. That's somewhere near here, and that's why it's called Malcor's Leap, guys. And also, this is the strait next to it is called the Strait of Malcor. It's all named that, and that's nearest the Grove as well. I don't know whether we talked about that when we were way back at the start of our adventure on Caraflower. Really incredible. So there you go. There are even more history scrolls. There's at least one... Let's see, one... Oh, have we read them all? Well, what I was actually going to do is I was going to read a selection, then go do the story quest, and then read a selection when we came out. But I guess what I've actually done here is read pretty much all of them, so we'll just do this one here as well then. I guess, since we've gone so far with it. Why not? It'd be weird now to just cut halfway through. So we could have paced this a bit better, I guess. So here we got 2 Whispers Suvari. Hello, friends. My heart tells me that I was born for this fight, and yet, when faced with it, I feel like a small reed whipping against a mountain. How can I fight against it without breaking? Oh, there's got to be a thing about bending here, right? By binding together, we will become stronger. You are no mere reed, friend. Trust me. Might as well offer your neck to Zaitan now. What the hell? We got to go with this, guys. The very thought fills my heart with thorns. Zaitan will have no part of me. Listen to me. By reflex, I found what reflection kept hidden from me. I will stand tall. I was made for this battle. There you go, soldier. Keep thinking like that. Oh, yeah, we were just motivating him. Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, he's a guy. I voiced him as a girl, but there you go. Is that like are we supposed to be doing like a kelp analogy here? Coriader. I like that name. That's a good Suvari name. I wonder if anyone's taken that. I look around this camp and see different types of people all joined for a cause. It makes me feel like I'm a part of something new and grand, and permeating and unfathomable as the dream itself. Interesting. I wonder what Johan would think about that, how people idolize this pact. All right, the last scrolls. Okay, so this is actually quite a long one. We'll go for it, whatever. We'll go for it. The scrolls seem to be multiple volumes of a single work, a collection of prose about the human gods entitled The Six. So, the 6 gods that we know actually changes over time, for what it's worth. Like some gods predate other gods and they have rises and falls. So the 6 we read here are going to be different to the 6 we currently know and different to the 6 that we've historically known as well. So you'll notice there is no Cormyr written here. There's Abaddon written here. So this comes from a period of time when Abaddon was known as one of the 6 and before all the stuff with Guild Wars 1 where Cormyr became one, okay? You also notice that this is Grenth and not Grenth's predecessor, Doom, and that'll be stories that we get into. So, first of all, Dwayna, the leader of the gods, goddess of life. The first of the gods to step forth from the mists was Dwayna. And we don't know who's writing this or how reliable it is, by the way. Goddess of air and life. She placed her pale foot on the stones of Ra, opened the gates and brought humanity to the world. She chose Tyria, and brought with her those who would make this world a paradise. As she had promised, Dwayna led her people to peace. So her people being what the other gods? Humans. We know that the humans supposedly were brought through the mists. Balthazar came in fire and wrath, carrying the head of his father and leading his fierce hounds, Tamar and Tegon. He swept all with a cleansing flame. It was he who claimed Tyria for humanity. He who said the other races would be easy to defeat. It would not be the only time that the Master of War was wrong. So this is a very cynical approach for Balthazar, and maybe remember that. Think about this. You know, Balthazar is actually portrayed fairly antagonistically here by the contemporary Guild Wars 2 devs. In the original game, we heard some positive stuff about Balthazar, some negative stuff about him in Cantha. Here, he seems, you know, like a brutalizing bastard, to be honest. But he claimed it for humans. He fought for humans more, it seems, than the other gods who may have favored other races and thought about other races like the Forgotten and whatnot. The Jotun. I say that for a reason that isn't transparent on the Let's Play yet. But, so yeah, next we have Melandru, the goddess of nature. Next, how do they know the order? This is fascinating to me as well. How do we actually know who arrived in what order and why? Next came the goddess of nature, wise Melandru, oldest of them all. This is kind of cool, because in Guild Wars 1, there was like an adventuring band, like Destiny's Edge. That were comprised of different classes, and the oldest and wisest of them was the ranger back then as well, Aiden, and here we see the ranger kind of, you know, the earthy thing, also the oldest and wisest. So Melandru is actually older than Dwayna, but she's not the leader, just as Aiden was older than Devonna, but not the leader. Anyway, that's all probably a bit too precise and meandering for a thing to be talking about so much. Anyway, wise Melandru, oldest of them all, made Or a green and flowering expanse. She urged peace with the races already present on this world, but her advice was not heeded. When she saw destruction, she brought creation. Where she saw anger, she grew love. With this, Melandru prepared for a future she knew would be troubled. Look at this. Who was fighting and why? She seems like the most pure and good of them all. I mean, even over Dwayna a bit there, who's more typically associated with, like, monkish and healiness and whatever. Volume 4, Lissa, goddess of beauty and illusion. The two who are one, Issa and Liss, brought with her the hope and beauty of humanity. While the other gods focused on building a Ra and beginning a new future, Lissa gave them joy and helped them forget the past. What past did Lissa help us forget? So Lissa is a really weird thing. She's a paradox, right? Is she a god or is she two gods? The two who are one, here we're kind of getting a suggestion that they are twins. You see that it's called Issa and Liss? My main character on my account is actually named Liss, right? Over this scroll. But here's the thing. It's Issa and Liss here. Other references to the two gods and goddesses have over time had different names. Like one of them was Liss and Ilya, I think it was. Though maybe the devs patched that and retconned it and changed it. I can't remember anymore. A couple of years ago, there was definitely a patch to do with this. I just don't remember the specifics. Anyway, yeah, Lissa, a paradox of a god. For a while she lived, veiled and hidden in the village of Ren. That's the same place we heard the merchant at. That's the same place we know that there's a Pact camp at. It's the same place as well, by the way, that if in Divinity's Reach you interact with Malkor's statue of Lissa, you get to read some scriptures, and you hear about the village of Ren there. When the building of Ra was completed, Lissa was commanded to join the other gods, though her tears fell like rain along the Western Road. The Western Road, you see this meta's called Pact Troops Move Out, will actually continue along it. It will become the Western Road, right? So many things will all start coming together in terms of the environment, the points of interest and places we go to. It's beautiful. I love the thought that all the other gods were kind of like, they were so isolated and they just lived in Ra and did their own thing. And deceptive and illusory as she was, Lissa at least spent time with the people. And she spent time with the people until she was commanded by the others. What we're going to see as the story goes along, guys, is that Lissa always seems to be like the odd one out. And she's kind of like doing her own thing. And like she's kind of a special case, it feels like, in a lot of scenarios. Remember this, that here she had to be commanded by the others to get back and stop talking to humans and hiding among humans. But she's also deceptive and deceitful. So like, she's a bit like Balthazar in a way, where it's like, is she good or bad? We don't really know. Abaddon, the god of secrets. So, we already know a ton about this. I'll just read this out. Among them was Abaddon, once secret keeper, now betrayer. How you have fallen from the glorious days of old. What passed beyond in the mists, only you remember. What is this? So, Abaddon arrived on Tyria, worshipped and revered as one of the six, only fell out of favor when he gave everyone magic, and then fought and blew up a friggin' ocean and turned it into a desert and stuff over the fight, and then he was cast down and his temple ended up down here. But he was the secret keeper. He knew things about the mists and from where they came from. What past? Only you remember? Now this thing, him as a secret keeper, what we will eventually find, you see this mysterious map here. The very minor spoilers. This isn't really a spoiler at all, to be honest. But what we're going to find is this region of the world, eventually, was like Abaddon's area where he kept all of his secrets in giant reliquary buildings. It's very, very, very cool. Anyway, by the time these scrolls are being written, it seems like they don't like him anymore already. What passed beyond the mist, only you remember. Abaddon. Abaddon. Your name has been erased from the towers. Your cathedral condemned to the sea. We visited that. Turn your faces away, O sons and daughters, and let not his gifts tempt you. Some people did. The Marganites let them tempt him. And finally, God 6, Grenth, the god of death. And you might have been fascinated and loved all these other pieces. This one's probably one of the best, though. Pay very close attention, and I will say very little. Grenth, son of Dwayna. So who did Dwayna have a son with? Who did... Grenth, son of Dwayna, first god born of Tyria. So, what you should recognize here... I can't stay silent on this. What you should recognize is that Grenth didn't arrive out of the mist with everyone else. Grenth was, like, born here. of here. So, who did Dwayna get it on with? Malcor was a big part of the story earlier. Who is Grenth's dad? That's a big question. And then also you want to wonder... Who was here when they first arrived? Who was here before? First god, born of Tyria. His powers deal in mortality and judgment. Defeater of doom, lord of the seven reapers. He is prince of ice and sorrow. Guild Wars 1, we get to learn about Doom, the prior gods. And, yeah, so there was some kind of big struggle. We all know about the Abaddon struggle, but that was not the only god struggle to take place here on Tyria. There was another. Grenth versus Doom. Standing before his immortal mother, Grenth claimed his place among the gods. Where his father had fallen, Grenth would rise. Was his father Malcor? Well, things to think about. So there you go. There's all the scrolls. How far into the video are we? We're 40 minutes. Now, under the classic format of this Let's Play, I would now go straight into Ketamance, and we would deal with a state of decay. I guess we'll start it off at the very least. But unfortunately, the episodes have to be a bit shorter now, guys. They really do, so that I can regularly put them out. So let's just watch the opening. And so, yeah, we've seen some of the best lore, and now what we're going to see inside this building is one of the hardest bosses.
Let's just storm the place, kill everyone we find, and raze it to the ground.
Nice plan, Bloody. But the Pact conducts itself with more style than your frothy brain can handle.
Keep it down, you louds. Keep your interlegion bickering to a minimum.
Whoa, now that's sneaky. After we beat Saitan, how about you come train with the Ash Legion?
Jealous, Snarl? That's what comes from being second-rate.
Pipe down. We've got rough work ahead of us. Scout detail, form up.
Hell yeah. This is going to be great. Galena and Snarl are back. Agent Zri is back. Hector. There's a lot of recurring faces, and I'm just going to be blunt as we cliffhang this. Not all of these beloved characters we've all interacted with before are going to make it out of this next mission alive. I'll see you guys for that next time. Good luck, Karen.